He was the kind of man people described as polite, reliable, even charming. In his quiet suburban neighborhood, he never raised suspicion. He smiled at neighbors, helped with groceries, and never made trouble. So when tragedy struck, no one looked in his direction because killers are supposed to look dangerous, right? But the truth was far darker. Beneath the calm, composed exterior was a mind capable of calculated cruelty. This is not just a story of murder, it's the unraveling of a man who wore his mask so well, even those closest to him never saw it coming. This is the story of a killer no one suspected.
If no one had started asking questions, this story would have ended very differently. To the outside world, it seemed like nothing more than a disappearance. People go missing all the time, right? Maybe she needed space. Maybe she wanted to start over. That's what he wanted everyone to believe. He counted on people not looking too closely on them, believing the version of events he carefully laid out. He filed a missing person report. He told friends she'd been acting distant. He even sent a few text messages from her phone, pretending she just needed time alone. It was just convincing enough to be believable, but not convincing enough to quiet the instincts of the people who really knew her because something didn't feel right. The sudden silence. The way she left behind all her personal belongings. Her passport, her purse, even her prenatal vitamins, nothing was taken. And she was 7 months pregnant. This wasn't someone walking away from her life. This was someone who had been taken from it. If those details had been brushed off. If her family had ignored their doubts, or if the detectives had overlooked one crucial piece of evidence, the killer might have gotten away with everything. He might have gone on living his life, going to work, meeting friends, blending in. No one would have ever known what he had done. That's what makes this case so terrifying. It's not just the brutality of the crime, it's how close he came to hiding it. How easily he manipulated the narrative. Because when someone like him slips through the cracks, it raises a haunting question. How many more are out there? People who smile at you in passing. People who shake your hand. People who could be hiding something monstrous right beneath the surface. This wasn't just about one life lost, it was about how easily justice could have been lost with it. Every time someone ignored their instincts or accepted the easy answer, he gained more time, more freedom, more control. And the deeper you look into this story, the more you realize this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. Her name was Elena Rossi. Born in 1993 in the quiet town of Frosinone, Italy, she grew up surrounded by the kind of love that makes a person feel unshakable. Her parents, Marco and Teresa, were school teachers, modest, principled, and deeply devoted to their daughter. From an early age, Elena stood out not just because she was bright, but because she was determined. She had a presence that made people stop and listen, even as a child. Teachers called her focused. Friends called her fearless. Her mother used to say she was born with a map in her hands, always searching for the next big step. By her teenage years, Elena had developed a passion for architecture and design. She could spend hours sketching buildings, talking about space, and reading about how cities were built. Her dream was to one day work in Milan, to become part of the city's pulse, the center of style, innovation, and opportunity. That dream guided every decision she made. She studied hard, graduated at the top of her class, and eventually earned a spot at one of Italy's top universities for architecture. Her professors described her as a rare mix of talent and work ethic. She wasn't just smart, she was driven. She didn't want to be known. She wanted to be respected. After completing her degree, she worked for a local design firm in her hometown, but by the time she turned 27, it was clear she had outgrown the pace of small-town life. She needed more. Not just professionally, but personally. She wanted to find herself in a place where possibility lived on every street corner. Milan was calling. And like everything else she set her mind to, she didn't hesitate. She packed up her things, hugged her parents, and promised to visit soon. They were proud, but like any family, they were worried. A big city meant risk. New people, unknowns, but Elena was ready. She moved into a modest apartment and quickly started making connections. She picked up freelance projects, attended architecture expos, and made an impression at every firm she walked into. Milan was tough, competitive, and fast, but so was she. And for the first time, It felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. What no one knew, what even she didn't realize, was that amid this bright new chapter, something dark was waiting. A meeting that seemed harmless. A man who seemed charming, and the story that would soon take a turn no one saw coming. His name was Matteo Bianchi, and on the surface he was the kind of man people forgot almost instantly. Not because he was unremarkable, but because he was carefully, methodically, forgettable. He worked the front desk at a high-end hotel in Milan, always in a crisp uniform. Always on time, always with just the right amount of small talk. He knew how to disappear into a role. His job was to smile, open doors, and stay out of the way. And he was very, very good at it. To the outside world, Matteo was what most would call normal. Quiet, respectful, professional. His co-workers described him as helpful. A little aloof, maybe, but never threatening. He never got angry, never raised his voice. He offered assistance when asked, but never lingered too long. It was easy to assume that Matteo lived a simple life, one without conflict, chaos, or darkness. But that assumption couldn't have been further from the truth, because Matteo didn't just wear a mask, he was the mask. He had spent years constructing the image of a man who had nothing to hide. But behind that cool exterior was someone completely different. Someone who needed control like most people need air. Someone who smiled on the outside while carefully calculating everything on the inside. His past wasn't scandalous, but it was quietly disturbing. Raised in a household ruled more by silence than love, Matteo learned early on how to read people, how to adapt, charm, manipulate. He was a master of saying exactly what someone needed to hear, even if he didn't believe a word of it. It wasn't about connection. It was about leverage, control. Former partners had described him as moody, unpredictable, emotionally distant. But Matteo always had a way of making them doubt themselves. If a woman said he was being cold, he'd call her needy. If she asked too many questions, she was crazy. He turned every concern into a character flaw, never his, always theirs. He was the kind of man who never exploded, but instead simmered. He didn't lose control often, but when he did, it was never loud. It was quiet, precise, and it always came from a place of calculation. You see, men like Matteo don't kill out of impulse. They kill because they think they've run out of ways to maintain the lie. And for Matteo, nothing was more dangerous than someone who saw through him. By the time Elena met him, Matteo had already crafted his greatest performance, the calm, respectful, stable man, the one no one would ever suspect. And that's exactly why he was so dangerous. They met like most people do these days, by accident, in a moment that seemed unimportant at the time. Elena had just wrapped up a long day. It was late, raining, and she ducked into the lobby of a luxury hotel near her office to wait out the storm. She wasn't a guest, just a tired woman looking for shelter and a quiet place to sit. And that's when she noticed him. Behind the concierge desk stood Matteo Bianchi. Neatly dressed, calm, polite, he offered her a towel for her soaked hair, made a harmless joke about Milan's unpredictable weather, and went back to his work. She smiled. That was it, but fate or coincidence brought them back together the following week, this time at a cafe. He recognized her first. He greeted her like they were old friends. She was caught off guard, not because he was forward, but because he wasn't. He was warm but not pushy, interested but respectful. A little awkward even. It felt refreshing. Elena had always been drawn to confident people, fast talkers, ambitious types, men who took up space in every room, but Matteo was different. He didn't demand attention. He earned it with stillness, with his quiet voice, with the way he always seemed to be listening instead of waiting to speak. They started seeing each other slowly at first. A casual coffee, a walk through the city, a shared dinner after work. And in each meeting, Matteo seemed to study her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. He remembered details she mentioned in passing. He followed up about her deadlines. He made her feel important in a world that constantly made her feel replaceable. To Elena, this wasn't just the beginning of a romance. It was the first time in years she felt emotionally safe. Matteo didn't interrupt her when she spoke. He didn't mock her ambitions. He didn't compete with her, he was just there, steady, supportive, kind. Her friends were curious. Her mother was relieved. Everyone agreed he seemed like a good guy. The kind you settle down with, the kind you build a future with. And Elena, who had spent so much of her life climbing, striving, proving herself, finally felt like she could rest. With him, but Mateo's stillness wasn't peace. It was calculation. It wasn't about seeing her, it was about learning her. And every word, every gesture, every moment of silence was part of something bigger. Something she wouldn't understand until it was far, far too late. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A joke that felt a little too sharp. A look that lingered too long when she mentioned a male colleague. A comment disguised as a compliment. You're lucky I'm patient. Most men wouldn't deal with someone as busy as you. On their own, these moments seemed small. Elena laughed them off, like so many people do in the early stages of something new. After all, no relationship is perfect, but the signs kept coming. He would grow unusually quiet when she got excited about work. When she mentioned a new client or a networking dinner, his mood shifted, not outwardly, but subtly. His warmth cooled. His texts slowed. And when she asked if anything was wrong, he'd smile and shake his head. I'm fine. Just tired. Then the questions started, masked as concern. Do you really think they respect you at that company? Why do you need to go to every event? Don't you want a night with me? Do you trust all those people you're meeting? He never told her what to do. He just made her question herself. Slowly, Elena started changing her routine. She turned down a few invitations. She stayed home more often. Not because he asked her to, but because something in her wanted to avoid the coldness he gave her. When she did in single quotes to dot, then came the humor. Light teasing that always seemed to punch downward. He poked fun at her accent, calling it cute at first, then mocking the way she said certain words. He made sarcastic remarks about the shows she liked, her style, her friends. In public, it looked like playful banter. But in private, it stuck. It chipped away at her confidence in quiet, invisible ways, and when she brought it up, when she said, "That hurt my feelings," he'd tilt his head and reply, "You're too sensitive." Or worse, "You always make things about you." That's how it started, a slow erosion. A subtle reshaping of how she saw herself and her place. In the relationship, there were no explosions. No shouting matches. Just confusion, self-doubt, and every time she questioned him, he flipped the narrative. He wasn't being cold, she was being distant. He wasn't annoyed, she was imagining things. By the time Elena began to feel like something was off, she was already second-guessing her own instincts. And Mateo? He was already in control. At first, it felt like love. Mateo wanted more time together. More quiet nights in, more just us moments. He said things like, "I only feel calm when you're here," or "You're the only one who gets me." And Elena, like anyone who wants to be loved, mistook those words for devotion. He didn't say, "Don't go out." Instead, he said, "I just miss you when you're gone." He didn't forbid her from seeing her friends. He asked, "Why do you still need them when you have me?" The isolation didn't come in one sweeping change. It came in inches, small decisions that didn't feel like decisions at all. One missed brunch with her college friends. One rescheduled call with her sister. One message she didn't reply to because she was just too drained to explain. She told herself it was just a phase, that life was busy, that she was just settling into her relationship. But she was shrinking, and she didn't even realize it. Mateo, however, noticed everything. He would grow noticeably cold when she came home late. If she seemed energized after seeing friends, he would become quiet, withdrawn. It was as if her happiness outside of him irritated him. When she brought up an old friend who wanted to visit, he raised an eyebrow and said, "That's strange. I thought you said she was always jealous of you." And just like that, a seed of doubt was planted. He didn't shout. He didn't slam doors. He wasn't that kind of man. He weaponized silence, withheld warmth, made her feel like she had done something wrong without ever saying the words, and so she adjusted. Again and again. Soon her world had quietly shrunk to the size of their apartment. The buzzing life she had once pursued in Milan dinners late-night meetings. Friends who called her ambitious was replaced with quiet evenings filled with Mateo's favorite movies, Mateo's favorite meals, Mateo's rhythms, and the saddest part? She believed she had chosen it. From the outside, nothing looked alarming. There were no bruises, no obvious signs. Just a woman who seemed to be drifting away from the people who loved her. A woman who had once been full of fire, now tiptoeing through a life that no longer felt like hers. And Mateo? He had exactly what he wanted: control, quiet, complete control. While Elena was carefully folding herself into Mateo's world-cutting ties, changing habits, making room, he was doing the same. For someone else, her name was Kara, and she had no idea she was part of a secret. They met through his work. She was a frequent guest at the hotel business trips, always alone, always in a hurry. Mateo was charming, helpful, patient. He offered recommendations, remembered her room preferences, even asked about her father's health after she once mentioned he was sick. She called it thoughtful. In truth, it was rehearsed. To Chiara, he was someone steady, a man who didn't play games, someone who had been hurt before and just wanted a quiet life. When she asked about his past, he was vague but vulnerable. There was someone, he'd say, lowering his eyes. But it didn't end well. She changed, became obsessive. I had to let go. That someone, of course, was Elena, still living. With him, still believing in a future he had no intention of building. Mateo kept the worlds separate with a precision that bordered on terrifying. With Elena, he was the partner struggling with stress at work. With Chiara, he was the man recovering from a toxic relationship. He coordinated schedules like a machine. He told Elena he was picking up extra shifts when he spent nights at Chiara's apartment. He told Chiara he was crashing with friends when he returned to Elena's. He erased texts, switched phones, made sure they never crossed paths. He crafted two realities, and he thrived in both. What's most chilling is how easily he did it. There was no panic, no close calls. He had answers for everything. Because in Mateo's mind, people weren't real, they were roles. Characters in a story, where he was always the director, but cracks, no matter how small, always start to show. Chiara began to notice he avoided taking photos. He never posted on social media. He dodged questions about his day. He flinched when asked to meet her friends. Elena, too, felt something, though she couldn't explain it. A sense that he was always somewhere else. His mind, his mood, his time. Two women, one man. And 1,000 lies keeping it all afloat. But the truth, like rot beneath wallpaper, was starting to seep through. And neither of them had any idea how dangerous he would become once his story began to unravel. There's always a moment where control starts to crack. For Mateo, it came in the form of a thin blue line on a pregnancy test. Elena had been feeling strange for weeks: nausea, exhaustion, that vague sense that something was changing inside her. She took the test alone in their apartment bathroom. And when she saw the result, she smiled. Not just because she was pregnant, but because she believed this would be a new beginning. A family, a future. With him, she waited for the right moment. She lit candles, cooked his favorite meal. And after dinner, she told him. He didn't say a word at first. Just stared. Calmly, coldly, he asked, "Are you sure?" No smile, no excitement. No questions about how far along she was. Just silence. In the days that followed, Mateo didn't mention it again. No doctor's appointments, no future plans. He didn't even acknowledge it happened. He wasn't shocked, he was calculating. Because this wasn't news to celebrate. It was a problem to solve. At the same time, across the city, Chiara was dealing with her own discovery. She too was pregnant, but unlike Elena, Chiara wasn't sure she wanted to keep it. She told Mateo nervously, expecting shock, maybe even anger. But he was calm, too calm. He told her it wasn't the right time, that he'd support whatever decision she made, but he strongly suggested she end the pregnancy. And she did. He even went with her, sat quietly in the waiting room while the procedure was done, held her hand afterward, said all the right things. But his mind was already elsewhere. He hadn't solved the problem, only delayed it, because Elena wasn't making the same choice. She was keeping the baby, even as Mateo grew colder. Even as he avoided the topic entirely, she stood firm. She was going to be a mother with or without him, she told her family. She started making plans. She began looking at baby names. Maternity clothes. She didn't realize that, in Mateo's eyes, every move she made was an act of betrayal because he wasn't preparing to become a father. He was preparing to make sure the child, and Elena never saw the light of day. What began as a lie was now spiraling out of his control. And when men like Mateo lose control, they don't fall apart. They get dangerous. Very, very dangerous. By the beginning of 2023, something inside Mateo had shifted completely. He wasn't scared. He wasn't panicking. He was planning. Mateo had decided that Elena and the unborn child she refused to get rid of were threats to his carefully curated life. A life he had built on lies, deception, and control. And if he couldn't talk his way out, he would find another way. He turned to the one thing he trusted more than people, the internet. Late at night, after Elena went to sleep, Mateo would sit in the dark with his laptop, searching, reading, comparing poisons that don't leave a trace, slow-acting toxins, how to mimic pregnancy complications. He wasn't just browsing. He was studying, learning how to make a person die without anyone knowing it was murder. He read about plant toxins, rare chemicals, even looked up methods used by assassins. But most of them were too risky, too traceable, too complicated, too dramatic. Then he found something that caught his eye: rodenticides. Rat poison. Legal, cheap, easy to buy. Some types, he read, could cause internal bleeding, anemia, exhaustion, and abdominal pain symptoms that looked almost identical to severe pregnancy complications. Most doctors wouldn't even question it, especially if the victim had no idea what was really happening to her. Mateo made his choice. He bought the poison discreetly, in small amounts from different stores across the city. He kept the packaging hidden, tucked away behind cleaning supplies where Elena would never look. Then he began the slow process of feeding it to her drop by drop, meal by meal. He'd stir it into her tea, mix it into her soup. Just enough to weaken her, but not enough to kill her yet. He needed it to look natural, like her body was rejecting the pregnancy, like nature was taking its course. At first, the effects were subtle. Elena felt tired, then dizzy, then nauseous. Sharp pains in her stomach began to wake her in the middle of the night. She thought it was just part of pregnancy. Even her friends said the same. It's probably hormones, they told her. This is all normal. But it wasn't normal. It was murder happening in real time, and Mateo, he watched it all unfold with chilling patience. He consoled her when she cried, rubbed her back when she said she was scared. He pretended to be the caring partner, all while killing her slowly from the inside out. But there was one thing he didn't expect: her strength. Despite everything, Elena didn't weaken as fast as he hoped. Her symptoms lingered, but the pregnancy progressed. The baby was growing, her body was fighting back. And with every day that passed, Mateo's plan unraveled a little more. He had hoped for a slow fade, a quiet ending. But now he was running, out of time and patience, and when men like Mateo can't win with silence and poison. They turn to something louder. And far more violent. It happened quietly, like most evil things do. It was a Thursday. Elena had spent the day resting. She hadn't been feeling well again. The nausea had returned. The sharp pains wouldn't stop. Still, she smiled when Mateo came home. She told him she decided to go back to Naples just for a few weeks, to rest, to be with her family. She needed space. And without saying it out loud, she was finally acknowledging what they both knew. Their relationship was over. She thought she was setting a boundary. He thought she was ending his control. That night, she packed her suitcase, folded her clothes, lined up her prenatal vitamins, wrote a note for her mother that she planned to deliver the next day. She would never make it. Mateo watched her, silent, unreadable. His world was collapsing, his lies unraveling, his secrets exposed. He had lost. Chiara, Elena knew everything, and now she was leaving him. That baby was going to exist. That child would be born. And with it, The proof of everything he had spent years hiding. He didn't snap, he made a choice. When she turned her back to close her suitcase, he walked to the kitchen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't give a final warning. He simply picked up a kitchen knife, heavy, sharp, clean, and walked back into the room. Elena didn't see it coming. The first wound was deep, fast, centered on the back. She screamed, tried to turn, tried to fight, but Matteo was relentless. This wasn't a single moment of rage. It was a methodical, frenzied attack. Every stab was deliberate. Every blow driven by weeks, months of resentment, fear, and the terrifying realization that his life was no longer in his control. By the time he stopped, there were 37 wounds. Elena was gone. Her body, still and broken, lay in the same room where she had once planned a nursery. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was panic. Because for all his planning, Matteo hadn't thought this far ahead. He stood over her body, blood soaking into the floor beneath him, and realized what he had done. He had killed the woman who trusted him, the child she was carrying, and any chance he had left of keeping his story intact. But Matteo wasn't finished yet. He had one more lie to tell, the biggest one of all. He was going to make it look like she had disappeared, willingly. There was no grief, no regret, just calculation. Within minutes of killing Elena, Matteo slipped into something even more terrifying than violence: normalcy. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He cleaned. Blood had pooled across the floor, staining the carpet and splashing up the walls. He grabbed towels, rags, industrial cleaner, scrubbing, spraying, wiping with the kind of focus that looked less like panic and more like protocol. As if he'd rehearsed this. As if he'd always known, deep down, that it would come to this. But no matter how hard he tried, the stains wouldn't lift. Blood has a way of sinking into everything, and guilt, that stains even deeper. So Matteo moved on to step 2, make Elena disappear. He dragged her body into the bathroom, placed her in the tub, and doused her in alcohol. Then without hesitation he set her on fire. His plan was simple. If he could destroy the evidence, he could destroy the truth. But even fire betrayed him. The flames burned, but not enough. Not long enough, not hot enough. Her body remained scorched but recognizable. Forensic science would see everything he tried to erase. Still, he pressed forward. He wrapped her remains in plastic and towels, hauled them into the garage, moved them in the dead of night, hiding them first in the building's basement, then back again to the garage. He kept changing the location, not because he had a real plan, but because fear was starting to outweigh logic. But it wasn't just the physical evidence he was trying to manage, it was the narrative. He picked up Elena's phone and began texting her family. A short message to her mother: "I need space. I'll be gone for a while." To a close friend: "Don't worry. I just need time to think." The messages were vague, deliberately so. Just believable enough to delay concern. But it didn't feel right. Her mother said the tone was off. Her friend said it felt cold. Unlike Elena, the words were hers. But the voice wasn't. Still, Matteo wasn't done. Just hours after the murder, he called the police. Calm, controlled. "My girlfriend is missing," he said. "We had a small argument. I left for work. When I came back, she was gone." He added the right details. Said she took her passport, her phone, even some cash. Made it sound like she had left by choice. He spoke clearly. Too clearly. With the kind of composure most people don't have when someone they love vanishes. And that was the first red flag. The second came soon after, when police entered the apartment. Even after his frantic cleaning, there were still traces: blood that had soaked too deep, odd scratches on the floor, a faint chemical smell lingering in the air. But Matteo smiled, answered their questions, stuck to his story. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He didn't know that investigators were already starting to see the cracks. And soon, they'd pull apart everything he worked so hard to fake, a lie at a time. The trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a public unmasking. By the time Matteo Bianchi entered the courtroom, the media was already calling it one of the most chilling cases in recent Italian memory. Headlines used words like manipulator, monster, and the killer no one suspected. But in court, Matteo looked exactly like he always had, neatly dressed, calm, unreadable. But this time, no mask could save him. The prosecution wasted no time. They walked the jury step by step through the timeline how Matteo had poisoned Elena over weeks, then murdered her when his plan failed. They played recordings of his 911 call, where he reported her missing just hours after burning her body. They showed surveillance footage of him dragging bags through the basement. They pulled up his internet history, every disturbing search, every fake document, every keystroke of a man designing a slow, invisible death. The courtroom was silent. Then came the testimonies. Elena's friends described how she had become isolated, unsure, withdrawn. Her sister read the last message Elena ever sent her, full of hope about the baby, unaware it would be her final words. Even Chiara took the stand. Her voice was shaky, but her testimony was clear. She spoke about how Matteo had lied to her. About the pregnancy, the fake DNA test, the carefully orchestrated deception. She looked at him only once when she said, "If I hadn't found those photos, I might never have known she existed." The defense tried to paint a different picture. That Matteo was overwhelmed, that he snapped. That the murder was impulsive, not planned. But the facts told another story. This was not rage. It was strategy, it was premeditation, and it was evil. Psychological experts called in by the court described Matteo as deeply narcissistic, someone who saw other people not as human beings but as tools. His lack of empathy, they said, wasn't a flaw, it was a design. Even during interrogations, he never cried, never asked about Elena. He only spoke about how things had happened to him. When Matteo finally took the stand, he tried to perform. He bowed his head, spoke in soft tones, said he didn't know how it got so out of control, that he never meant for it to go that far, but it was too late. The evidence had already spoken. The jury deliberated for just 2 days. When the verdict was Reed guilty of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, Matteo showed no emotion. He stood still, not a tear, not a twitch, as if he hadn't just been sentenced to life in prison. But for the people who loved Elena, justice, though long overdue, had finally arrived. Still, no one left the courtroom celebrating, because justice doesn't bring someone back. It doesn't erase fear or loss or the question that haunted everyone who knew her. How long had she been dying before anyone realized she needed saving? Let me know when you're ready for the final chapter, Section 15, Aftermath and Impact, where we reflect on Elena's legacy, the societal ripple effect, and what this story says about the quiet danger of those who hide in plain sight, asked ChatGPT. Elena Rossi was laid to rest in her hometown of Frosinone under gray skies and quiet sobs. She was buried with the letters her mother had written her during the pregnancy, folded neatly inside her favorite novel. The child she never got to hold, never got to name, was buried with her, a future stolen, a life interrupted. A silence that still echoes through every room she once lit up. But her story didn't end in that courtroom. It started something across Italy. Protests broke out in major cities: Milan, Rome, Naples. Thousands of women marched with signs that read, "Justice for Elena, no more silence." He looked normal too. Her case became a symbol of something far bigger than one tragedy. It exposed the quiet epidemic of psychological control, coercive isolation, and intimate partner violence that often hides behind closed doors. Masked by politeness and smiles. In interviews, experts spoke about how Elena's case wasn't rare, only visible. About how many women are trapped in relationships that don't leave bruises, but leave them walking on eggshells. About how society still underestimates emotional abuse until it ends in a headline. Her sister, Lucia, stood at a vigil in Naples holding Elena's photograph, her voice shaking as she addressed the crowd. "My sister didn't die because she was weak. She died because she trusted someone who never deserved it. And because the world still doesn't see danger when it wears a quiet smile." New policies were proposed in the months that followed, measures to strengthen early intervention, expand definitions of abuse, and train law enforcement to detect the red flags Matteo so expertly hid. It wasn't justice in the purest sense, but it was something. As for Chiara, she disappeared from public life. moved to another city, changed her number. She gave one statement after the trial and never spoke publicly again. But in her brief testimony, she said something that stayed with people. I thought I was the one he wanted. I didn't realize he wanted control. And once I saw that, I saw everything. The apartment where Elena was killed has remained vacant. The landlord says no one stays long. There's a heaviness in the walls, a sense that something still lingers, but what lingers louder is her story, because Elena's name now lives not only in court records and news articles, but in legislation, in lectures, in whispered conversations between women who suddenly start to question the coldness in their own relationships. And maybe somewhere down the line, her story will give another woman the strength to leave before it's too late. She should be here, raising a child, designing buildings, laughing with her friends, alive, but her voice, though stolen, is not silenced, because now the world is listening. Elena Rossi's story is not just a tragedy, it's a mirror, it reflects how easily a life can be manipulated, how love can be weaponized, and how monsters don't always come with a warning sign. Sometimes they wear uniforms, smile politely, say all the right things. Sometimes they sleep in the room next to you. Matteo Bianchi was not a shadowy figure lurking in the dark. He was the man who opened doors for strangers, who texted good night while planning something unspeakable. He didn't kill out of rage. He killed to maintain control. And the scariest part is until the moment he snapped, no one saw him coming. This case forces us to ask hard questions. What does danger really look like? How do we protect people from harm that doesn't leave a mark? And how many more stories, like Elena's, will it take for us to finally listen when someone says, something feels wrong? This isn't just a story about a killer. It's a story about what happens when control is disguised as love, when the person you trust most becomes the one who ends you. Elena was silenced. But in telling her story, we make sure the silence doesn't win.